There are two political parties. One has a rising star, J.D. Vance. The other has a rising star, Josh Shapiro. I am proud to be with Josh Shapiro as a human matter, not even just, as you say, as a kind of policy matter or because they have different views on tax policy or something like that. Josh Shapiro behaved there and stood up there like a decent human being and a good public servant. And J.D. Vance has behaved in the last 48 hours and unfortunately times before that as well, not as that.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. We're back. It's Monday. We're with Bill Kristol. Before we get to Bill, I just want to provide some updates about things that we've learned since taping yesterday's weekend show with Sam Stein following the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Regarding the shooter first, we still don't know a whole lot. One classmate said that he was very conservative when they were discussing political issues in class. Others said he was bullied. Several remembered that he was rejected from the school's rifle club for being a really bad shot and also making some concerning jokes. He wore a T-shirt of Demolition Ranch, a popular gun YouTube site, to the event in Pennsylvania. He had explosives in his car, rudimentary explosives, authorities said. The weapon was purchased by his father. Still no known manifesto or motive. Also, more evidence of security failures continue to pile up. There are videos of people shouting about the shooter for minutes while he's on the roof. A cop engaged him on the roof, but then backed off before he fired into the rally. We've also had an Oval Office address from the president. Trump gave an interview to Selena Zito. And on top of all that, Judge Aileen Cannon has dismissed the documents cased in Florida. So, Bill Kristol. Where do you want to start?
I don't know. Black despair, or actually, I think I wrote my piece today. It was against despair, so maybe we shouldn't start in despair.
Yeah, against despair. Let's not start at despair. I do think. Look, Sam and I. Let's start here. Sam and I, were discussing yesterday, and I think spent a fair amount of the time in a measured way, just talking about the overheated rhetoric that we have in our politics right now, the apocalyptic rhetoric that we have. And we discussed partially the, all the various people that are responsible for that, including President Trump, as who's exacerbated it, frankly, in a lot of ways. I come today, like with another 24 hours of sleeping on it. And while I still think that's an important topic for everybody to self-reflect on, we still don't know anything. There's no real evidence, based on what I just laid out there, that this murderer was influenced by any of that. We don't actually know anything yet. And so I do wonder kind of what you think about that whole, how that has really kind of dominated the fallout, and that topic has dominated over the past 48 hours.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, why shouldn't we assume as a first approximation, at least, that he's like one of these terrible school shooters, murderers, who are often disturbed and sometimes they have, I guess you could say, political attitudes, but mostly they don't seem to. So I very much agree that this notion that this tells us of one person, disturbed 20-year-old, about whom we have no evidence that he was particularly political or motivated by rhetoric of the extreme left or, for that matter, of the right, of Trump. Yeah, why assume that this tells us that much about our political culture? I mean, having said that, obviously we have we have a lot of rhetoric floating around that shouldn't be, and let's just be obvious. And obviously, the bulk of it is due to the right, not to the left, in this current moment in American politics, and the bulk of it is due to Donald J. Trump. And I myself was reticent to sort of say this, and in our internal discussions, as you know, I think I was right, and we sort of all decided to be restrained yesterday and not to spend 4 hours after an assassination attempt against him. And I'm glad he's well, and I'm very sorry that obviously someone at the rally died, and two others were very badly injured. But I mean, I think it's wise to hold off for a bit and saying something, even if it's true. But the truth is, Donald J. Trump has been the main purveyor of extreme and violence-friendly rhetoric into the American mainstream.
Yeah, there's something like kind of solipsistic about like the media class, immediately going to, maybe this was about us, and because maybe it was, who knows? Like maybe it wasn't. There's still a lot we don't know, and that was something that I tried to emphasize with Sam. But I just think I wanted to put a finer point on it today. I mean, like the one to this question of rhetoric and responsibility. I think that we can all say what is still true today, based on what we know, is that the apocalyptic rhetoric, the dehumanization of political opponents, is out of control, and there are many, many, many people in public life for whom, maybe a little reflection on that point is in order, including us and our colleagues at times. Trump, though, like put that on hyperdrive. Like there was like this type of dehumanizing rhetoric and apocalyptic rhetoric, like was not really that nearly as common in our political discourse in 2014 as it is now. And the killer may or may not have been impacted by any of that, right? Like all three of those things can be true, right? And I think that that's sometimes hard to say without, you don't want to feel like you're, not meeting the moment, right? Like not being appropriate for the conditions. But like those are all statements of fact as we sit here on Monday at 9:09 a.m.
Yeah, 10:09 a.m. in the East here for
10:09 in the East. Sorry,
for the inside the Acela corridor, the real time zone of America. I have to insist on that. No, you're absolutely right. Obviously, and look, none of us has said that Donald Trump was in any way was responsible for this 20-year-old doing what he did. I mean, this is not. Again, this is sort of maybe some people have. There's been some attempt to say that, but none of us knows that, and none of us at the Bulwark, I don't believe, have said that.
Yeah, and that'd be crazy.
But the other, J.D. Vance, took 2 hours before saying that this is due to the Biden campaign, not even incidentally to some far left types who undoubtedly are involved in incendiary rhetoric. Not that there's any reason to think this young man knew about them or anything, but the Biden campaign. That this is, I mean, how unbelievably irresponsible is that? And just to put a finer point on your fine point, I mean, Trump is not just another player in this. He's the nominee of one of our two major parties now for a third time. He was president of the United States for 4 years. The effect his violence-friendly, incendiary rhetoric has is just at a different scale than a random backbench member of Congress, a local radio talk show host. I mean, whatever. Those people everyone should be held accountable for whatever he or she says, including us and including people in the media. But Trump is not just, there are like 14 people or 140 people in America who are kind of irresponsible. One of them just happens to be this guy, Donald J. Trump. That is not the world we're living in. This guy spent 4 years as president of the United States in a way that no previous president in our time, or maybe any time, has done. And incidentally, in a way that no previous candidate in our time or any time, presidential candidate, has done in incredibly irresponsible and violence adjacent, let's call it, rhetoric. So, I mean, I have no problem, as you say, saying two things. We don't blame Trump for what happened Saturday night, and I'm glad he's well and so forth. Very sorry for what happened. But on the other hand, we need to tell the truth about his role in the last decade in American politics.
We've all been here before. This morning, Axios is out with a just absurd story. I don't really like to do media criticism on here, but just a totally preposterous story about how Trump could unify America, and we're going to have a new Trump now that's based basically on nothing, I guess, except for that Trump told Selena Zito in an interview that he's rewriting his convention speech and he's planning to give a unifying speech. And I went back. We've all been through this so many times, and I wrote an article after the shooting in El Paso in 2019. This was August of 2019. And if you don't remember, there was a mass murder at a Walmart in El Paso. 22 died. And, there was a moment then where, Kellyanne Conway and people around Trump were talking about how, this is not a moment to point fingers. This is a moment for unity. And we need to come together. I wrote at the time, just there's all of these series of things. So I was like, that's a great notion. If Donald Trump's going to do that, I'm on, that's good. Okay. Everybody should dial it back. But these empty calls for unity from somebody that has been the leading cause of divisiveness without any acknowledgement of responsibility is just hollow. Like, it's just BS. And I listed all the things that he did, all of his incitements to violence in this article. We'll put it in the show notes. But there were some, rereading it now, I didn't even remember. Like, apparently he made a joke in Pensacola about people in the Panhandle murdering immigrants. Like, some guy I'd forgotten this. Some guy shouted at him from the crowd, we should shoot the migrants. And Trump started laughing and saying, yeah, only in Pensacola can you get away with that. So, when you say that he has engaged in some violent adjacent rhetoric, like, pretty straight on violent rhetoric, actually, he's engaged in. I mean, there are many other examples, but that was just one that struck me as I was scrolling through the article.
I mean, if I recall correctly, the shooter in that horrible mass murder in El Paso had a manifesto that did not reference Trump, to my knowledge, but referenced certainly right-wing anti-immigrant
the replacement theory,
theories and literature, and literature. So if I can use that term loosely, the shooter at the synagogue in Pittsburgh a year before that, similarly, so there is plenty of actual empirical evidence that stuff that is one tick to the right of Trump, 2 ticks maybe, 1 tick to the right of some of the Republicans in Congress, on the other hand, 0 ticks to the right of some of the people speaking at the Republican convention this week or moving in Republican circles, has led to mass violence. I mean, this is, so again, it's not as if, it's just kind of this climate, just kind of, it's like climate change. It just happens, and there's this bad climate in American politics. I mean, there's some of that is true because of bigger socioeconomic trends and social media and all that. I'll stipulate that. But an awful lot of it is due to one man and one movement, let's call it, or different parts of that movement.
Yeah. What do you make about, it's always good to just reflect on this stuff and think about it. Like, what do you make of the criticism that, if you say that there's going to be no more elections, if you say that dictatorship is coming, if you say that fascism is coming, then crazy people out there are going to feel like they need to take that into their own hands, and that maybe there's some reflection needed on that type of rhetoric coming from the left. What do you make of that critique?
I mean, I think some reflection is always needed, especially when one's making a strong claim about a political opponent. I think a lot of us have reflected and tried to be clear when we say that we say pretty soon after the next sentence that therefore we need to really mobilize peacefully and defeat him electorally in 2024, or we said the same thing in 2020 or in 2016. And there was not a whole lot of left-wing violence that I'm aware of after Donald Trump won in 2016. And he won the nomination this time, which puts him in, with some reasonable chance of becoming the next president. And there weren't a lot of left-wingers saying, okay, to the streets to disrupt the Republican convention. I mean, it's just, so I think you can take one sentence and say, well, if you take this, I suppose seriously, it could induce someone to violence, and I hope it doesn't. And we should all try to be careful that it doesn't, and deplore it and tell people they shouldn't act violently. But we've all done that many times. And again, just empirically, where are the people acting violently because of Joe Biden's rhetoric? Who has cited Joe Biden as they went to a MAGA rally and, God forbid, tried to beat up someone or something like that, let alone shoot someone? It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened because it's not actually an incitement to violence. And the right-wing rhetoric that's adjacent to Trump is an incitement to violence.
Part of the reason that nobody's responding that way to Joe Biden's rhetoric is the nature of Joe Biden's rhetoric. So he gave a speech last night in the Oval Office. That was fine. It was okay. He had a couple of stumbles, a really unfortunate one saying that we solve these things at the battle box. He said that twice instead of ballot box. The idea was fine. The rhetoric was fine. I will say that, when Sam and I were talking yesterday, we were talking about how challenging of a moment this is for Democrats. I do think it is challenging. Like, I think that they have to be critical and call out, as you wrote in the newsletter, these bad faith, absurd attacks from the right and the lies, and they have to continue to do that. But there is an obligation to reach out to any people in red America that will reach back, right? And to signal that you're trying to unify and you're actually putting effort to it, that you're genuine about that. And, that's something that Obama, for all his flaws, was pretty good at. And that Joe Biden at one time was pretty good at. And I don't know. I'm not sure he really nailed that last night, but what were your impressions?
I mean, I thought the text of the speech is fine and indeed admirable, really. He's just not up to giving it powerfully, and he's not up to convincing people, I think, that he could do this for 4 more years, and therefore he should step aside, as I've said over and over, and don't need to litigate that today. But I think that's the problem. It's not that he doesn't believe in unity and in decency, and it's not that he doesn't say those words and sentences, as he should. But I think you mentioned this, I think you mentioned this, I mentioned this in this morning's letter. Many people have mentioned this, the contrast between him and Josh Shapiro, who spoke in Pennsylvania, the governor of Pennsylvania, who spoke yesterday as well, a few hours before President Biden, standing at a microphone, paying tribute to the man who was killed at the rally, and making his own call for unity in his state and in the nation.
Yeah, I actually have a
just
little
the contrast is so startling, Sorry.
Yeah, well, let's listen. Actually, let's listen to Shapiro. And I think this is just before we play it. One thing I wish I had thought of yesterday when we were talking about the podcast is like one idea might be, to demonstrate this genuine commitment to unity, to putting out an olive branch, would be for the president, who was has been a marvelous eulogizer at times, to offer to eulogize the man who was murdered at that rally. Now, maybe they wouldn't want President Biden there. Maybe they wouldn't want to politicize the funeral or whatever. But like making that offer or offering a pay-in to him, I think would be a good first step. Here's how Josh Shapiro handled that off the cuff in a press conference.
We lost a fellow Pennsylvanian last night, Corey Comparator. I just spoke to Corey's wife and Corey's 2 daughters. Corey was a girl dad. Corey was a firefighter. Corey went to church every Sunday. Corey loved his community. And most especially, Corey loved his family. Corey was an avid supporter of the former president and was so excited to be there last night with him in the community. I asked Corey's wife if it would be okay for me to share that we spoke. She said yes. She also asked that I share with all of you that Corey died a hero, that Corey dove on his family to protect them last night at this rally. Corey was the very best of us. May his memory be a blessing.
Yeah, Bill, and that's pretty wonderful. Humanizing a political opponent, humanizing and just speaking extemporaneously about, how there is no animus about the idea that this person loved President Trump, that's good. Like, that's okay in America, that we can have political opponents who are passionate and, we can disagree and we can be, in the arena together and have it not be something that is violent or cruel or negative. And, I think that the governor's remarks there were absolutely spot on and reflective of why he's so popular.
Yeah, as he said, he behaved heroically. I was moved by Governor Shapiro's remarks. And I did think, as I happened to see it live, so I was watching TV then, leave aside Trump and Biden. Okay, there are 2 political parties. One has a rising star, J.D. Vance. The other has a rising star, Josh Shapiro. I am proud to be with Josh Shapiro as a human matter, not even just, as you say, as a kind of policy matter or because they have different views on tax policy or something like that. Josh Shapiro behaved there and stood up there like a decent human being and a good public servant. And J.D. Vance has behaved in the last 48 hours and unfortunately times before that as well, not as that.
Concur. So I know that you said that we're not going to do the Biden step aside thing for now, but I have one point that I want to make about this, because maybe I have 2 points actually. It's my podcast. Here's my problem with as it relates to the Trump question about pivoting to unity, and like the Biden question about like whether Biden is up for this campaign. Like, there's no parallels to me between those two men and how they act and what kind of leaders they are or policies. But like in this one sense, like I don't. There's this cable news like environment that, like, I'm a cable news contributor, so I contribute to it, right? Where you have to analyze every moment, right? And you have to analyze like, well, was Trump's speech 10% more presidential than the speech before? And, was Joe Biden's Oval Office address 10% more vigorous than the speech before? And I just kind of like, I think that myself and many people in America have come to a conclusion already about the men. And like, they've been in public life for a very long time. And the conclusion about Donald Trump is that he is a cruel asshole that does not actually care about anybody besides himself. And so if he does a good job pretending to for a day or two, that's nice. But like, that shouldn't change your views of him as a person fundamentally. And I feel kind of the same way about the Biden age question. It's like, if you've demonstrated that you can't do the job of standing toe to toe with Trump in this crucial election, then it's kind of like, what does it matter, right? Like whether you're a little bit better, a little bit worse day to day. Like it just like the microscopic analyzing of this stuff seems to kind of miss the forest for the trees for me a little bit.
Totally agree. I mean, and look, I saw Biden, he spoke 3 times this weekend. I agreed with his sentiments and applaud his sentiments really each time. But he's not the best spokesman he's not the best opponent to Trump. He's not the best spokesman for his party. He's not the best spokesman for the broader cause, I'd say, at this point. And not only not the best, but he's a very halting one.
Yeah. And this is where you imagine, this is a frustrating thing. There's this Axios story or some blind senior Democrat. I've got some people in my mentions when I tweeted this, some progressive folks, some pro-Biden folks saying, this is fake news. I'm like, whoa, that sounds a little familiar. Let me tell you, if an Axios reporter quotes a senior Democrat, it's a senior Democrat. All right. Like this is not, I've had a lot of complaints with Axios. Their article today about Trump is absurd, but they don't do fake quotes. A senior Democrat saying that they have come to terms with Trump, basically echoing what Ezra Klein said on this podcast last week. And I find that so outrageous and so offensive and pathetic and embarrassing. I understand the sentiment of feeling like after that debate and after, Donald Trump and having this iconic image of him, like holding his fist up in the air with a bloody ear, that like it might feel like that we are in an inexorable path to Trump 2.0. Like, we're not. There's 3.5 months left. Donald Trump still has a lot of flaws. There's no reason to not like Donald Trump. A lot of people out there still do not prefer him as the president if you gave them an alternative. And like this notion that we now, because of what happened last weekend, have to just silently continue down a path to defeat with somebody that nobody in private on the Democratic side thinks can win is absurd. like we're in unprecedented times. We had a man with Hussein as his middle name become the first black president, and then a reality show host become a president. Like, why not try something? Why not try to mix it up and offer somebody that could speak like Josh Shapiro does to our better angels, and maybe offer a refreshing change? Anyway, that's my Joe Biden. Anyway,
I agree. I mean, it's an uphill struggle, but that just means you struggle hard and maybe struggle with some new ways. You rethink some of the people you've been using, and if I can put it that way, who've been leading you in the struggle or whatever. But absolutely, it's pathetic, and it's, I don't know who the senior House Democrat is, but I agree with you. It's a real quote and a very distressing one. Interestingly, I haven't seen any polling on this, and it'll take a while, obviously, for everything to settle in and what happened Saturday night. But Liam Kerr, our friend who runs the Welcome Party, Bulwark contributor at various times, they happened to be in the field with a big poll actually doing attitudes and all kinds of other things. And they asked the matchup question too, Trump Biden, and so they divided. They sorted out people who they had talked to Sunday evening after the Saturday night assassination attempt, as opposed to I think Thursday and Friday before, and there was a change of 1 point in the matchup. And Trump's approval went up about 3 points, and Biden's approval went up 2 or 3 points. So there's a little bit of a rally to to both of them, and so I don't buy the argument that people joked, I suppose, privately, oh my God, after that iconic photograph and all, Trump's going to be unbeatable, but I think that's not true. And the odds you and I have been pretty honest, I think, in saying that Trump's ahead and it's going to be uphill to beat him. But that's very different from saying we have a 20 or 30 or 40% chance of winning to saying we're resigned to a Trump presidency. It's so unbelievably irresponsible. And it doesn't matter, I suppose, some Democrat says it on background to Axios, but it is demoralizing. And I don't know how many people out there read that and don't do something they were thinking of doing to try to help win a state for the Democratic nominee. But
well, it matters because let's have some creativity.
Yeah.
Let's try. Can we try to try? Can we try? That's what my problem is. I refuse to just sit here and not comment on a party that wants to just go on with business as usual, in the face of Trump very, likely being a clear favorite to ascend to the presidency again, to be elected to the presidency. It is absurd. It is ridiculous to say that, to be like, let's just sit around and do nothing, or let's just keep on with business as usual. And I said this to the Biden folks, and before all of this craziness happened, it would have been something we talked about in this podcast, because on Friday, Biden did at least do a lot of things that we've been begging him to do, right? Which was deliver a contrast message against Trump, in a speech in Michigan Friday. So, okay, even if it's Biden, reassessing, changing, being open to creative ideas, right? I do not want to hear from anybody that would only happen in the West Wing. We can't do that. Biden can't offer to have a joint eulogy for the man that was murdered at the rally, because that stuff only happens in the West Wing. We're living through a time that only happens in the fucking West Wing. We're living in crazy times. Let's try to be a little more creative and thinking and optimistic and try to change the tone and tenor of this campaign a little bit.
No, absolutely, very well said. Totally agree. The West Wing thing is also annoying. And liberalism, back when I was young, was too utopian, sort of fuzzy-minded, wishful. Maybe we thought it was, at least, to be conservatives and neoconservatives. And that was kind of annoying at times. Everything was judged. Incremental progress wasn't good enough. We have to transform the world overnight. We have to wish that communism goes away instead of standing up to it and going through the slog of the Cold War, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's flipped to the total opposite. Now, if you say, you know what, we could actually defeat someone who really is a threat to democracy, we could actually achieve something. You're living in the West Wing. That's even worse in a way, that kind of fatalistic, cynical liberalism, I think, than the earlier, more somewhat utopian and naive liberalism.
Yeah, enough with the cynicism. Okay, I want to talk about the RNC convention and Aileen Cannon, but any other final thoughts on what Democrats can and should be doing right now?
I just think having the attitude that you expressed very well, that it's very important to win, it's possible to win, and we have to be imaginative and bold in doing what we need to do, obviously within the law and within peace and so forth, to win. And you know what? Joe Biden stepping aside in favor of John Shapiro or Vice President Harris or Gretchen Whitmer, that's entirely within the law and peaceful, and exactly what a responsible party should try to pull off.
And maybe refreshing. I do think that there's a lot of people out there who want to move on from this era. There was another blind Democratic quote that said that. That's might we consider that the people are really just, maybe that's unfair to President Biden, but are really sick of this era? Why are we still here? Having this type of political violence, this type of rhetoric, this type of extraordinary events. Could maybe somebody that offered a more calm page turn be something that's appealing? I don't know. It seems like it to me. Okay. Do you want to do the convention first or Aileen Cannon? Which one do you have broader thoughts on?
Cannon just broke like 5 minutes before the show, so I have
no thoughts. Okay, give me
1 minute of thoughts.
on Aileen
1 minute
Cannon.
of thoughts on Cannon, which we can get rid of now if you want. Which is, I mean, this was a theory she seems to have embraced, that the special prosecutor is not, correctly appointed. That I think was regarded by everyone as an utter fringe theory. In any case, the Supreme Court has never gone in that direction, and quite the contrary, since it's as we speak, is hearing cases from special prosecutors, right? I mean, so a district judge has decided to reinvent a very big issue of separation of powers and constitutional law against all the appellate courts and the Supreme Court because she wants to help Trump. I mean, that's Trump's America, though. I do think it's a very useful wake-up call. This is what Trump will appoint many, many more Aileen Cannons. And people will be going on, and it is if he's elected to a second term, and people will be talking about the rule of law and the guardrails of the judiciary. And guess what? Those guardrails don't hold, and the rule of law doesn't hold if the judiciary is full of Aileen Cannons.
Yeah, it's another maddening part about let's just come to terms with a Trump win. Because it's not even just 4 years, right? Like you point, Aileen Cannon's going to be there forever until she gets impeached, in 2042 by President AOC or whatever. All right, the convention. So I guess I'll just say, if it is true that they're changing all the speeches to tone it down, I think that is both politically savvy and wise and good for the country. I think it's politically savvy and wise for Republicans because I do think they risk a boomerang effect if there's too much bloody shirt waving and too much craziness. I do think that there's a category of Americans that have rallied to the president's side after the attempted assassination, but I think there is a big middle that doesn't want crazy unrest and threats to violence or any of that sort of stuff. And so hopefully they do that. I'm not really crossing my fingers, but that they can control everybody that speaks at this convention, and that people won't want to try to turn the rhetoric up. But I don't know. What's your sense for what they will do, should do?
I think they can do this if they want. They can pretty much control what people say to a pretty considerable extent. And obviously what people remember is what Trump says and maybe one or two other high-profile speakers, not what everyone else says. So I hope they do for the sake of the country. I think it's unfortunately probably helps Trump a little bit, though it fades away also, to be honest. For me, the VP pick, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this, is key, though, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing that will come out of the convention, maybe apart from Trump's own speech. And that can go in one of two directions. Really, J.D. Vance, literally the guy who said the single most irresponsible thing that was said, I believe, on Saturday night, seems to be a front runner. The other candidates are not, people we love by any means, but are at least on the side of, I think, somewhat less incendiary message from the Republican Party and from the Republican ticket this fall. So what do you think? Who does Trump pick?
I've thought it was JD the whole time. I do think there's two ways to look at it if you're Trump, though, right? I mean, I think that I saw a MAGA account say this, so this is their words, but they were like, I think that now Trump needs to consider assassination insurance more for who the VP is. That it would be somebody that would continue the MAGA, carry the MAGA mantle forward. Macabre but possible, something that goes through their minds, right? You have to think about where things go post Trump. The other way to look at it is that maybe this is a time for rethinking, and if Trump buys the same narrative that even the senior House Democrat buys, that he's on a glide path to victory and he just doesn't have to, and he should just not rock the boat too much, and maybe it's maybe that causes a rethinking, right? And he wants to choose somebody that feels safe and feels unifying, to whatever that means, really. To me, that is probably Burgum, right? If that's the path that you go, or somebody else that hasn't really been talked about that much lately, like a Tim Scott. So I don't know. To me, it still feels like it's JD, but I wouldn't put any money on it.
I've been slightly on the side that it will be a Tim Scott Burgum type. I don't know if Tom Cotton quite fits in that category, but I think he's a little harsher than they are, but respectable, still on the respectable voted to certify the election in 2020 side of things, as opposed to Vance. So I guess I've thought for a while that Trump might go that direction, obviously pre-assassination attempt. Maybe he's more inclined to go that way now, but maybe he also doesn't think he needs to go that way now. So I could argue that either way. I think Vance would undercut all the unity bullshit, if I could be honest. Right? Don't you think? I mean, you're putting him number 2 to the president of the United States after this, this latest demonstration, something that's been a pattern now for quite a while.
Yeah.
And
I agree, but maybe but I'm of the view that the unity stuff is BS. Caputo wrote about this morning, and based on his sources, a lot of people around Trump liked what J.D. Vance was saying, obviously, right? Because they are filled with vengeance and they, are mad. So I like that's anyway. We'll see. You've never lost betting on these people doing the least honorable thing. So I'm going with J.D. Vance. We'll see next Monday who's right. Another thing to watch out for in this speech, I think that they're going to use. This is just one example of this from Deace, Steve Deace, who's this Iowa radio talk show host. Was a Christian conservative turned MAGA. Once admitted that he had a serial masturbation problem that he was dealing with, that he got over, and so we're proud of him for that. He wrote this: the original plan this weekend was to sentence Trump, but when that didn't work out, they decided just to try shooting him instead. And so I have like a new they rule for this week. And I think it will be interesting to see how much of that we see at the convention, which is they are out to get Trump. They tried to stop him. He couldn't, right? That there's some shadowy conspiracy, to go after Trump, rather than the fact that Trump is a criminal that committed crimes and a crazed shooter went after him. That there's some web that ties it all together. And I think that that's going to be too irresistible for them not to try to employ this week.
Yeah, I suppose what's implied is that they is headed up by Joe Biden, or at least acquiesced in or by Joe Biden, right? And so when we are accusing the president of the United States of orchestrating an attempted assassination of his rival, but yeah, you're right. How many other people at this convention are going to be saying things like that? They're certainly not going to ever denounce anything like that, God forbid, right. Which, you and I are old enough. Well, I'm old enough. You're almost old enough to remember Bob Dole in 1996 telling Buchanan delegates who believed in racism and nativism that the exits were over there and they should feel free to leave. I mean, Dole didn't win in 96, so I suppose people can say, but you know what? That was a party that it was okay to be part of.
Indeed. All right. Speaking of who's going to be there, I have one more clip for you. This guy, Mark Robinson, I just think this is important to listen to as we think about the context of the overheated rhetoric in our political culture right now. Here is Mark Robinson, the Republican gubernatorial candidate in North Carolina, the other day. He will be speaking in Milwaukee this week.
There was a time when we used to meet evil on the battlefield, and guess what we did to it? We killed it. We didn't quibble about it. We didn't argue about it. We didn't fight about it. We killed it. Some liberal somewhere is going to say that sounds awful. Too bad. Get mad at me if you want to. Some folks need killing. Time for somebody to say it. It's not a matter of vengeance. It's not a matter of being mean or spiteful. It's a matter of necessity. Time to call out those guys in green and go have them handled.
You one of those liberals that is not happy about a candidate for governor saying that some people need killing?
I mean, can we just pause for 1 second and say he is the candidate for governor of the Republican Party in a major state, North Carolina. He's endorsed, I believe, by every Republican from Trump on down through other governors. The Republican guy, I haven't seen a statement, maybe I missed it, from the Republican Governors Association saying that we can't support this person.
Oh, no, they're with him.
They're with him. I haven't seen a statement from any senators, members of Congress, Republican. I mean, so it's perfectly fair and it's true, right? I mean, you can say, well, there's one governor. There are 25 different Republican governor candidates, but fine, let one of them say he shouldn't be. Republicans in North Carolina shouldn't support him. Republicans from out of state shouldn't help him, support him financially, and let someone say he shouldn't be speaking at the Republican convention, which he's currently scheduled to do. So I think it really brings home, yes, the degree to which not every single Republican is going to sound like that at the Republican convention, but none of them is going to denounce other Republicans who sound like that.
Yeah, pretty sick stuff. Okay, Bill, anything, any historical thoughts? Me and Sam were talking about 1968 on yesterday's pod, but neither of us were around then. And so I guess were you not in the Reagan administration yet when he was?
No,
he was an assassination attempt victim?
I remember that so well. I mean, and I remember because it came after, all those years of 63 with President Kennedy, 68 with Reverend King and Bobby Kennedy, 72 with George Wallace, 75, luckily totally not, hapless attempts against Gerald Ford, and then 81. So one thought, oh my God, every 5 years we're just going to have an assassination. Incidentally, in 81, there was the attempted assassination of Pope John Paul II. There was a Margaret Thatcher. They blew up that hotel that she was staying in with part of it with her cabinet, the IRA. And you just thought, I don't know. I mean, it's 15 years of violence. Can democracy survive that? And then there was this period, a lot of violence, horrible school shootings. I don't have to minimize any of that, but less political violence at the presidential level in the U.S. certainly, and I would say in the other major democracies too, probably. And so one thought we were beyond it. And I did have a moment Saturday night thinking, oh my God, are we going to go back through another decade now of this? And I don't know if we will or not. Maybe I hope it's not. I hope we don't. And but you know what? We're more likely to if we have an awful lot of people saying incendiary things. And so I hope this.
Yeah, I really hope we don't too. And this was why, and I said this yesterday, I just want to reiterate it again. I really get upset at the people in my mentions. You're getting blocked and muted if you make jokes about how you wish like that shooter had been successful, because he was one. It looks like had Trump not turned his head to look at the Jumbotron or whatever he was looking at that had the chart on it that he was referencing, that he probably would have died. If you just I've looked at several of the kind of diagrams of the angle of the bullet, and because he had turned his head, he survived. And like when you think about that era that you just went through and the political violence, it feels like an assassination attempt would have. And obviously we've been told, you don't want anybody to die. It would have been horrible for Trump to be killed, but also too, the following, like what would come after, right? Like that period that you're referring to with the series of assassinations, right? Like we would have been in such a fraught time for it to happen right before the convention. I mean, it would have been an unbelievably dangerous moment in America. And so anyway, I do look at that and feel like everybody, that is one area where everyone needs to make sure they have cooler heads. Like that's not acceptable kind of rhetoric. The other history thing that I learned this week, Bill, lastly, leave you with that just hadn't occurred to me, is there was a assassination attempt on the president every 20 years from like 1900 or maybe even 1880 through that, and the streak broke with W. Right. So like that does tell you something a little bit about like, because in my era, I grew up in this time that you're referencing where like we really haven't had political violence. Like we had a lot of violence. We had school shootings, other types of violence. We haven't had political violence. But to think about it in that context, speaks a lot to, kind of what American life has been. Any final brave words for us on political assassinations and violence before I let you go?
I'm look, it's wonderful that Trump turned his head, honestly, and that he missed. It's terrible that a gentleman was killed who behaved so heroically and two others wounded, and that and just generally to have this specter return. But But let's that's something everyone can unite in denouncing this violence. And I think it's very good that really almost all of President Trump's opponents, it didn't matter whether they were left-wing Democrats or centrist Democrats, right, have said this is terrible. This is terrible. Violence must be repudiated. So let's hope that sticks across the political spectrum. And frankly, I do hope that some people at that Republican convention take a look at their own rhetoric and their own associations and maybe say a word or two about how violence against anyone on all sides is unacceptable.
Amen to that. Bill Kristol. We'll see you next Monday and see whose instincts were right on the vice presidential pick. We'll be back here tomorrow with a reaction to the first night of the RNC convention and President Biden's interview with Lester Holt. We'll see you all then. Peace.